Hello everyone, I'm gonna talk to you a little bit about who Nezahualcoyotl is, especially his philosophies, more than his life. He has a very interesting life, by the way, but his philosophy is really amazing, and it's something by which I live by. And it's also interesting to know the way of thinking of Nezahualcoyotl, especially in these times we live in, where everything seems so dark and probably even desperate. We want to become better humans, we want to become a better world, and in a way Nezahualcoyotl offers that. Now, to begin with, he was a king. Yes, he was a warrior as well. He was an engineer. He was an artist, a poet. He was a lot of things. Endless. I mean, diplomat, general at some point. He was a lot of things. But he was also a philosopher. And for King Nezahualcoyotl to leave behind a set of rules to live by was important, not only for him, but also for his descendants, as well as me as a descendant of Nezahualcoyotl, direct descendant, by the way, to live by this code. I don't know if he created or discovered, because during his life he suffered a lot. He was an orphan since the age of 13, 14, something like that. He actually had to flee. He was a refugee. He had to flee out of his kingdom in order to escape death, certain death, by Emperor Tezosomoc of Azcapotzalco. Now, he suffered a lot, so he knew stuff. He knows his stuff. You know, a philosopher is not just someone that wakes up and says, you know what, I have this idea to become a better person. You have to know what makes a better person, because that made you a better person. All of this, his ideas, made Nezahualcoyotl a better person. And boy, he was a great person, because from being an orphan and living in the streets, in the forest, escaping certain death, I mean, he was a prince and he became no one. Out of the blue, he was poor, he was an orphan, but he became a better person. And he had to live to a period, as harsh periods of his life, to envision his ideas and his philosophies. Now, his philosophy revolves around the idea that life is too short. That's like the focus of all things Nezahualcoyotl. Life is too short. So, if life is too short, what are you gonna do about it? A lot of people cry, and he cries at some point in his poetry. He says that life and the idea of coming to have life may be meaningless because of how short life is, and there's no reason to be. But he then goes on and gives his ideas of how to profit better this idea of having a short life. And he has a great idea. He says that in order to do something with our short life, we have to leave something behind. Now, you have to remember, nothing, and this is something that Nezahualcoyotl talks about, nothing remains of us after we die. Not even our body. At some point our bones decay. DNA, actual DNA, disintegrates after, I don't know, thousands of years. So not even our memory remains at some point, because if you think of it, after several generations of our own descendants, if you have descendants, people will stop remembering you. Even if you're so famous, or there is something that at the end, everything of what is you will disappear from here. Now, this idea terrified Nezahualcoyotl. He was actually terrified. You have no idea. So what he did, and this is his idea to overcome this and to become a better person in this short life. Leave at least flowers. Leave at least songs. Now, that's the idea. That's the secret. In the 21st century, that may sound stupid in this era of TikTok and Twitter and meme wars. But you have to think about it, how he was explaining it and from where he was coming from. This idea of leaving flowers and leaving songs, Nezahualcoyotl was talking about leaving a legacy, about in the process of leaving a legacy, you'd become a better person, a better human, someone of worth, of becoming real. At some point he even talked about that, of becoming real, staying in touch with the spiritual. I'll talk about that in a moment. But his idea isn't about money or power or women or whatever ideological success. It's not about that. And this is where people may find, especially if you're trying to find a key ingredient to success, this is a key ingredient to personal success. And that's why I was telling you, I live by that. So trying to be a better person isn't just enough. It's trying to be a better person while you're trying to live in this world a legacy, something of worth. And this is where the tricky part comes from, because he was talking about songs, yes, songs, lyrics, poetry, books, whatever, writing, and flowers. What he meant by flowers, it's art or creations of things we create. It could be handmade, it could be real legacy, something of worth. It's not just about the value, monetary value. It's about the good you will leave behind in this world. Because in his poetry and in his philosophy, Nezahualcoyotl talks a lot about what we are leaving behind in the world. And if the world is going to remember us, is the world going to remember me? Is the world going to remember you? I know for sure that the world is still remembering Nezahualcoyotl. If not, I wouldn't be talking about him and you wouldn't be listening to me talking about Nezahualcoyotl. But that's the deal. He became known through the ages. And people who became known through the ages has to be by the legacy and the scope of it. We know a lot of people that do evil and do bad things. Their memory can perdure. But it's the idea of goodness that has to be in focus here. He talks a lot about being a better person. And the reason is because, and here's another key point of his philosophy, he was worried about death. He was really concerned about death. You have no idea. Like, me too. I'm always thinking about death. And this is because it's a natural thing. Death will come to us all. We know that. He knew that. And the idea, and this is what Nezahualcoyotl said, the idea of knowing that death is imminent was what brought a lot of depression and sadness to Nezahualcoyotl. And believe me, he was really depressed. But to overcome that, he needed to do something about it. He cannot defeat life. No one can defeat death, and he knew that. No one can. No one can change the physical universal law that after we die, we will not leave anything. He knew that as well, and that was very sad for him. And that's why he was always saying, at least we should leave flowers and songs. At least. And now, he's not coming as a hippie about flowers and songs. He was actually he was a very stark person, because nowadays you would call him a conservative, because his laws he implemented and in part of his philosophy was about moral correctness, about being a better person. Yes, but there are ways of doing it without affecting society as a whole. If not, society may crumble, and he knew that. And he saw how many empires and kingdoms fail during his time because of this issue, because they were not morally strong. And he talks about it. He even put the laws of moral laws to work. One example is, because you may be saying, well, what are these moral laws? And this is not just laws he implemented during his time in his kingdom of Texcoco, but also he used it as his philosophy to become a better person. First of all, he was against alcohol, which I am. I am against alcohol as well, and alcoholic beverages. And the reason is because he saw that consuming alcoholic beverages would make the foundations of society weaken. So it's not that he said drinking alcohol is bad because it brings the end of the world. In a way, he was saying that it's a contributing factor, just like the theory of the broken window comes for attesting that if there is something wrong and you don't fix it, something else will become wrong, and then the whole neighborhood will collapse. And if the neighborhood goes the city. If the city goes the nation. And you know what happens if a nation falls. You know, other nations try to mimic, and we're literally talking about the downfall of a civilization. Now, but I mean, we can argue that, but he was more simple. He was like, you have to be a better person, better yourself, improve. And in a way he did improve. And this personal improvement he did of himself, he became a better person from being an orphan. Yes, he was a prince, but he wasn't living in a palace anymore. He wasn't living in a luxurious property, or with his cousins, the Aztec princes, or whatever. No, he was poor. He became no one. But to become someone, and to become again king, and he returned king, and he became a great king, he needed to become a better person. He needed to improve personally. And this is one example about alcoholic beverages. And there are many other, like having a moral compass. And Nezahualcoyotl was always talking about this moral compass that not only society but the family has to have, and the husband and wife should have this moral compass in which there has to be some respect, there has to be happiness. He always was in favor of searching for happiness. And it's something of worth, because when he was a king, he actually implemented a lot of laws that also were pushed to improve the lives of those who were poor or disadvantaged. He helped them. Now, he didn't he was just helping them in order to follow his example. And this is where the part gets a little tricky, because Nezahualcoyotl has this idea of spirituality, but this isn't religious, this is more spiritual. And while at the moment, and various nations, Cuautitlan, Tenochtitlan, even the Mixtec nations, many had these personifications of spirits of nature, which nowadays academia and scholars, liberal scholars, call them gods and goddesses, which they weren't. But we have this personification of nature's forces of nature, and we see rain, wind, nature. Rain is, for example, Tlaloc. Wind is Ehecatl. Nature is Quetzalcoatl. But you know what? Nezahualcoyotl never talked about them. Never. From all the poetry we have of Nezahualcoyotl, he was more worried about this one great spirit that encompassed the entire universe and encompassed us, and it was in us and in nature and in all things. And he was always talking about it. He didn't have a name for this great one spirit. In fact, the several names he gave were like descriptions of things. In fact, the several names we have, like phrases, if you will, they are descriptions of this great spirit. Intloque Inahuaque, Ipalnemowani, Moyocoyani. There were many that he talked about the same one great spirit. And he's always worried about this, let's call it entity, from an anthropological point of view. He was worried about this entity, where he lived, why he created all things, and he came to the conclusion that we live because of that entity, of that spirit. And again, you can call it God, you can call it whatever you want, but he didn't give you a name. He was just, the several names he gave to this entity were just descriptions of that one great spirit. Now, in his idea, because this is his idea, no one else's, and that's another strange thing. In a time where you have state religions going on, the Aztec nation is rising after the fall of Azcapotzalco, and you see Nezahualcoyotl cornered in a spiritual sense, because he's not following the flock, he's not following the rest. He's believing in this great one almighty spirit, which we don't have a name. We just have the description, the adjectives, if you will, of this entity. Now, we don't even know if it's an entity, because Nezahualcoyotl calls this the source of our life. He calls him him or her by which we live. I know it sounds it's mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling, I know. But you have to remember, Nezahualcoyotl is a real intelligent person. He isn't someone that woke up and said, you know what, I have this idea, or because of my political ambitions, I'm gonna say this. No, this is a person that always stood by his beliefs. And we're talking about his personal beliefs, which includes the whole set of his philosophy. and his preoccupation for death, and for his way that society has to function, and how every person has to improve himself in order to become worthy and real in this world. So we have Nezahualcoyotl, who suffered a lot, who was an engineer, who was a warrior, who was a diplomat, he loved to read. Yes, they had books back then. For some reason, liberal academics say or want to give us this idea that they didn't have books, or Discovery Channel, National Geographic, whatever you want to say, the History Channel. But they had books. Actually, amochtli means book. Now, they had a lot of books. They had a lot of libraries. Actually, those libraries were burned during the conquest by the conquistadors. But I digress. The thing is that he loved to read, he loved to learn. Because, again, what's the purpose of coming to such a short life? What's the purpose of it? If you're gonna do nothing, if you're not gonna become anyone. Here's another key question, or maybe here's another key element. Nezahualcoyotl lived and walked his own beliefs, his own recommendations, his own code. He lived by his own code. He didn't just talk about it and that's it, like many modern day gurus, politicians, influencers, and many other two-faced people that they just try to take advantage of us for some reason, either economic, ideological, I don't know, even for likes, just for having likes in Instagram or TikTok. And he lived by his code. He wasn't someone who, when he talks about morality, and now that we mentioned TikTok, he wasn't someone that he was talking about a moral compass and not having it. He did have a moral compass. He actually even executed people. He executed women who went and violated his code of moral that he implemented, and before that as well, because he was worried that people had to become a better person. He had harsh punishments for such crimes, and that's the reason that there were no criminals. If you think of it, a person today, especially in Mexico, yeah, I'm gonna say it, if he was an orphan, if a Mexican was an orphan living in the streets, he would become either a criminal, most likely, I'm adding, a rapist, or whatever. And that's part of the issue in Mexico right now, that crime is taking over, and there is societal paralysis going on in Mexico, where we see the effects, the ongoing war that's spilling from Mexico to other places as well. I'm saying this because any other person could become a criminal, and it's very easy to fall out of the moral compass that I was talking about, that Nezahualcoyotl was talking about. But he had this moral compass and he lived by it. And instead of becoming Nezahualcoyotl, instead of becoming a low-life criminal, a petty thief, out of the blue rapist, you know, a serial criminal, serial killer, Nezahualcoyotl became a better person. That's the key of his success. From being no one, he not only got back his kingdom, he became a king again, vanquished his enemies, And his period of reign was one of the greatest recorded in his kingdom in Texcoco, and that's why a lot of people remember him and remember his feats and his achievements, because he was successful. And he was successful because he lived by his code. He didn't just talk about it. They weren't just ideas that he will put out there and then take the hand out. They were ideas that he lived by, and he knew how to become a better person. These ideas of Nezahualcoyotl were proven by his own life and by overcoming all his difficulties that he lived when he was young, and as he grew up away from his country, exiled, refuge in a strange country with different people. And that's how he became aware of how things should be done for the betterment of the person, for the advancement of the person. And I'm talking about improving, about how a person should improve. And sometimes people feel lost. Imagine Nezahualcoyotl. He was lost. He was no one, but he became someone, slowly but surely. And history attests that he did overcome all those obstacles. And he had this idea that even though death comes to us all in this short life, and yes, he says that it's something we should be preoccupied, sad even. Yes, we have to be a person with feelings. You don't have to be harsh. He was a really soft person in that regard, because he was in touch with his feelings. And because of that, he said, that's the reason why we have to be a better person. That's exactly the reason, because life, in a matter of sense, is almost nothing, because we come and go so easy from this earth. And he talks about how we just come here to this earth to live for a very brief time, that nothing else matters unless you leave a legacy and you become a better person while leaving that legacy, and leaving flowers, leaving songs, having to see this idea of having this life, to cherish it, because it's of value, and every person is of value. The problem is, you have to first of all improve yourself. You have to improve yourself to make worth your passing through this life. And he was worried about that. That's like one of the elements he's most worried about. And you need to do something about it. And think about it. Our life is too short, and this is what he tells us. And whatever there are along our path, like riches or rags, whatever there may be in our path, we have to become a better person. Now, we don't come here to become rich from valuables, because at the end, like I said, the central theme of it is that we're gonna die anyway, and we're gonna leave everything. We're even gonna leave our bones and our DNA, whatever you want to say, everything, we're gonna leave it behind. But Nezahualcoyotl said that at least we come here to collect friends. And he talks about it. That's a big topic for him, that we come here to collect friends as great princes and princesses collect precious stones for their necklaces. And he compares that because that comparison is made between having jewels, which means riches, which means material things to gather to, you know, money. The symbol he used is very powerful because what we come here to earn and collect are friends, friendship. We don't come here to collect money because when we die, money stays here. So when the game ends, you don't win, according to Nezahualcoyotl, because that wasn't the game. The game wasn't to collect as money as you can in this life. No one said that. No one. Who says that what we come here to do is to be the smartest, the most intelligent person? That's why we come from. Who says? Who says that we have to come here to have a super duper PhD? Who says? Where is it? I mean, our society comes from nearly 5,000 long civilization. 5,000 humans have been around roaming the earth for what? Hundreds of thousands. So who said something about money or PhDs or TikTok, having likes in Instagram? Who said that? So Nezahualcoyotl said, what we come here for, and that's part of the game of coming here to this life, is to collect friends. Not Pokemons, friends. And we have to collect them, and we have to search for them, just as great important people, princes and princesses, search for their jewels, and how they take care of their jewels, and how they treat their jewels as important, that they put them in the crowns, in whatever, the hands, earrings, rings. Because for many people, riches is what is more important now. That was his time. Maybe if Nezahualcoyotl knew about smartphones or the latest gadget or whatever, the latest app, probably he would say, you need to come to this world to collect friends just as you would the latest gadget, the latest iPhone. Now, nothing wrong with that. iPhone's pretty cool. I love apps. They are real lifesavers, but that's not the end game of our short, tiny life. We come here to collect friends, friendship, to meet people, to know people, to interact. And what we live, according to Nezahualcoyotl, at least songs, at least flowers. That's the idea of the philosophy of Nezahualcoyotl. I hope you like it. The philosophy is really deep. Nezahualcoyotl talks about a lot of things. Some are really good that should be implemented nowadays, especially when we as humans have lost touch. Forget nature, we have lost touch with ourselves. So in order to get in touch back with nature, and in order to get back to many things, primal things that made us happy to begin with, we have to search in philosophy, and we have to rethink where we are going as a society. So that's why I'm talking about the ideas, philosophical ideas of Nezahualcoyotl. And at least for him, it worked. And I confess, I follow the ideas of Nezahualcoyotl in my life, and they have worked too. And they make you humble, they make you a good person, and they make you someone of worth to take your short life to a good use, to a better use. So thank you for listening. If you have any questions or questions, you can send them to me. Thank you so much for listening.